It's the Brian Hornback Experience. This is episode 202. We are not in the Old Forge Distillery podcast studio. We're actually on location with General Sessions Judge Andrea Kline. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. So let's see. First of all, you went to law school. You graduated college. You went to law school. You became a lawyer. You worked in a couple of different types of the legal profession, but then you ended up at the DA's office. But you are a mother of 3 adult children.
Adult children.
That's good. And so let's just kind of talk about that first. Just kind of so what brought you into ending up at the DA's office for a number of years? Because you did do criminal defense.
I did a little bit of everything. I worked for an attorney, and then I actually started having children and went out and started my own practice. And I did a little bit of criminal defense. I did some domestic work. I did some guardian work for vulnerable adults and children. And I felt like I needed probably a little more structure, and I kind of wanted to see what was going on the other side, on the prosecution side. So I was lucky enough to get hired by Randy Nichols, and that was in 2000. And I really, like I said, I'd done defense work, so it made sense to kind of see what was going to happen on the other side. And I didn't know if I was going to stay a prosecutor or do that for a few years and then go back to private practice. And I kind of toyed with that idea, but I got in there and stayed for 25 years. It would have been 26 years this month if I stayed.
That is kind of interesting. The whole COVID thing caused me to really start paying attention to lawyers. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I haven't gone to law school, but through COVID, when there was judge vacancies coming up, like Governor Lee last night or this morning appointed someone to fill Judge Kyle Hickson's position on the Court of Criminal Appeals. So I started watching the YouTubes of the interviews, but then I also started watching Court of Appeals and all those kind of things. So it's been interesting to me, and I've got some friends who were in criminal defense. They went to the prosecutor, and then they went back to criminal defense, right? So it's just always interesting to me to think, okay, if I were a lawyer, where would I line up? Would I line up on the defense? Would I line up on the prosecution? I don't really know the answer to that. I think every case is different, right? So, but anyway.
And every individual is different.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and every case is different. I mean, But so you had an interesting career, particularly when General Allen came into office, and the fact that she started setting things up into
specialized units.
I was going to call it I was in my head just now. I was going to call it a working group, but yeah, specialized units. And elder abuse really kind of was the thing that come on, right? So kind of talk about what happened when General Allen said, "Hey, I want a specialized unit in elder abuse, and Andrea, I want you to run it." And then,
well, I want to give her credit first of all.
You got a whole litany of education throughout that process.
I want to give her credit for recognizing the need. Because that was one of the things that she had identified coming in newly into office, that we really weren't paying attention as well as we could be for those victims. And I got to give her credit for that. And because when she came to me and said, I want to start an elder abuse unit, will you do it? And I said, well, of course, what exactly is elder abuse? I mean, we just weren't, it wasn't the type of cases that had been identified on a regular basis that we were prosecuting specifically for those victims.
About what year was that?
Well, she took office in 2014.
14.
And it was immediate because she was setting up her structure.
Right.
And I said, sure, I'll do that. And I started looking at seeing if we had some other models within the state to kind of do the same thing that they were doing, why reinvent the wheel. And we didn't have anything. And then I had to start kind of looking outside the state, and there were some other states who had been doing it and doing it very well. And I was able to go to some trainings out of the state with some of those groups, saw their models, I did a lot of online looking and trying to get educated. I got to do CLEs with various organizations, just learning what elder abuse is.
Well, yeah.
And it's abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. And it's not just elderlies, it's also vulnerable adults. So if you have an adult who has difficulty taking care of their daily needs, if they need assistance with that, and that may be because of an accident, or they may have been born with some kind of limitations, then those folks would qualify too. But it's all adults, it's not children. I realized that when I got further into it and started looking at our criminal code sections, that the laws were just not adequate for what we needed to do to prosecute cases. And actually there was one law, a couple that were in where the criminal statutes live, but the rest of them were over in Title 71 where APS and those stuff live.
Right.
And when those laws were written in the 70s, they were pretty groundbreaking, but they hadn't been revised or looked at since then, and it just made it very difficult to prosecute those cases. So I went to others, General Allen and Lisa Z, General in another jurisdiction, and started talking to folks around the state. And they were also doing some hearings in Nashville. I was able to go listen to some of those, and I made some contacts there, and we've got a working group together, and over 3 years we were able to totally rewrite the code sections. So all of the elder abuse statutes that are on the books now in the Tennessee Code are the result of that work.
Wow.
And it was a 3-year, we wrote them, we lobbied for them and got them passed over a 3-year period. I'm very proud of that.
Which is kind of remarkable for somebody who's watched the legislature as I have for probably the last 25 years. It never really takes, I mean, most of the time it takes much longer than 3 years, particularly to go from something that was in another section of state law, put it all together and come up with a true code. But
and trying to make sure you're doing those correctly, because each section that you write, you have to make sure you're affecting other sections of the code too.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you're not creating unintended consequences, or you're writing laws on top of other laws so they're conflicting. So it's really not just creating the language of the new law, it's making sure that you're not creating other problems in other sections.
Right.
And also, what are the punishments going to be? What exactly is the definition? So it was really a very big undertaking, and I'm very lucky and honored to have been able to participate in that, because most attorneys don't have that opportunity in their career.
Yeah, because not only did you see the court side, not only did you see the victim and the perpetrator side, not necessarily firsthand, but through the process, but then you actually got to see the law writing, and then of course the law implementation, right? And so it's probably, as far as elder abuse, when you're just in generalities, out of all the other specialized units, how significant is elder abuse in, say, Knox County or any?
It's way worse than you would think. It's
probably underreported.
I don't. It's very underreported, and I used to have all those stats, but I don't have.
But I mean,
them at the tip of my tongue
and
now,
in all fairness, you haven't, prior to becoming a judge, which we'll talk about in a minute, you weren't in the elder abuse. Right.
I left that unit.
Right.
And for the last 5 years, I've been prosecuting DUIs in General Sessions Court, where now I'm judging.
Right.
I don't go into DUI court now.
So it's been about 6 years since you're in elder abuse. So.
Right, and they've probably made some changes. I know on the vulnerable adult abuse registry, I think the state's made some changes to that since I was in there. It used to be a lifetime placement. I think that may have changed now. But it's a vastly underreported crime. And then when it is reported, it's very difficult to prosecute for various reasons. Like, for example, these scams that happen.
Right.
It's very hard to find the perpetrators of that, especially the ones that are over in another country or they're in different states.
Right.
So it's hard to track those down. But there's a lot that goes on in every part of the county, every social class. I mean, it just happens.
Right.
And a lot of times it's family members, and it's caregivers, it's strangers. It's just, and there's a lot of reasons it's underreported. I found that when I was prosecuting, a lot of if it were family members, they didn't want to report their family members because they love them.
Right.
It's their son or their nephew or their daughter or their niece or grandchild.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time with those victims trying to explain to them that it wasn't my intent to necessarily send this person to prison. Sometimes it was.
Right.
But my goal was to protect the vulnerable person and stop the abuse or financial exploitation or neglect.
And I'm sure as a prosecutor, one, you want to stop the abuse, right, and call the person into account. And then, I mean, you can't really, as far as what happens between their defense, the prosecution, and ultimately the trial, I mean, you don't really know. You have no assurance that, one, they're going to walk, two, they're going to serve time. I mean, it's...
Right. And, in elder abuse, it's very difficult for those victims to come and prosecute cases. And I think this is probably nationwide, that prosecutors try to not put those victims through a trial situation. Because, I had a victim that would come in the morning at 9 o'clock and they would be great, but by 3 o'clock in the afternoon they were just spent.
Right.
Couldn't tell you who the president was.
Well, and truly, in a vulnerable elder adult situation, I mean, you're dealing with issues kind of like dementia.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're dealing with not just dementia, but you're dealing with folks that, their memory capacity is not great, right? And so,
or their physical abilities. It's coming to court is exhausting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And having to go through a hearing and testify, and then if you end up having a trial, it can be multiple days.
Right.
And that's really hard on those victims. And and for child abuse, for example, those victims are getting older and more confident and becoming. Hopefully,
they're getting on the other side of the pain,
right?
Getting through the process of healing,
right?
Whereas some of these folks are starting to regress back into
right, and your victims don't
almost the movie Benjamin Button, right? where he started as an old man and went to an infant, right?
But you have to be aware of that as an elder abuse prosecutor, that your victim may be very confident today, but if you have a trial that's 2 years down the road.
Right.
They may not be as able to testify.
So what happened in 25 was we've got 5 general sessions judges. They've all been there for a little while. I know Judge Jackson been there since 2006. Tony Stansberry been there since the 90s. Chuck Cerny's been there since the 90s. Patricia Hall's been there for a while. But we get into 25 and Judge Jackson decides, hey, I've been here since 2006. I'd like to enjoy some of my later years. So he decides to retire, right? So that's when you're like, hey, maybe I want to be a general session judge, because you've practiced in every court of general sessions.
Right.
And there's 5 sessions.
Almost daily
Right.
I was assigned to a criminal court for a couple of years exclusively. But for that time period, I've been down in those courts, even when I was in elder abuse, even though there were a lot of criminal court cases. A lot of our cases started in felony sessions or misdemeanor.
Right.
So I was in those courts daily for 30 years.
Right. And so in those courts, you've got basically 5 courts, right? So currently, everybody takes a turn. Ideally, you're getting a different court every week for 5 weeks, ideally,
and it starts over the rotation.
Right,
so you start in sessions 1 and then go to sessions 2 and so on. And 4 of those are criminal courts. 1 of them is a sessions civil court.
And every criminal case starts in sessions?
Not every.
Okay.
But the vast majority start in sessions court. You cannot plead to felonies in sessions court. You can only plead to misdemeanors.
Okay.
So, which direction do you want to go on this? There are 4 criminal courts.
Right.
1 civil sessions. The
Right.
4 different courts of criminal are misdemeanor court.
Okay.
Then you have DUI sessions.
Right.
And then you have felony sessions.
Okay.
And then you have a bonded arraignment and kind of traffic court.
Right.
So those are the 4 criminal, and then you have the civil. So any of the misdemeanors can be pled to by agreement, or worked out and disposed of at sessions.
Right.
The felonies either have to be reduced to misdemeanors, or they have to go upstairs to
Right.
criminal court, circuit court in some way. And
Right.
that can be by preliminary hearing. That can be by agreement to bond it over to the grand jury. If you have a preliminary hearing and there is probable cause, which is the judge's determination.
And that's what the general sessions judge determines if there's
Right.
probable cause.
Right, which,
Which
with
most of the
reason-
time, if it's before
Right.
you, it's probably rare that there's not probable cause, right?
That's the question
Right.
on every single
Right.
case,
Right.
but the majority of cases, at preliminary hearing, there is probable cause.
Right.
Because if there's not, there's a good chance that the prosecutor's not gonna put it
Right.
up
They're not
there.
going to bring it, right?
Because they have a duty to do their thing.
Right.
So if you find probable cause, then it goes to the grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
You can waive your preliminary hearing as a defendant and send it to the grand jury. And some people will do that for various reasons. They're going to have early discovery, or they just want it over with, or they don't want to have to worry about bond issues or whatever. There are
Right.
reasons for doing that.
Right.
And then you can also bond cases over to the grand jury, to bypass the grand jury, to go to criminal court for a plea by information, which means they've already got a plea agreement worked out, and they skip the grand jury part and go straight to criminal court and have that agreement already in place when they get there.
Right.
So those felonies, that's how they get up there. Now, there are other ways
Right.
that they can be charged where they're not in sessions, but when they come to sessions court, that's how they get upstairs to
Right.
criminal court. And we, last year, I think, concluded about 65,000 cases in
Wow.
the sessions courts. I think it was 70,000 plus the year before that.
Wow.
So it is a very busy place. There are a lot of cases. There are a lot of people's lives that come in and are affected by those courts. It's a gatekeeper for the rest of the system, so it's really important that we do our job there, that we make sure people know what's going on, that they are able to have their day in court. But it's also important that we move the cases along, because
Right.
backlogs, I went back to sessions court after COVID, and we already had backlogs there.
Right.
That just because we couldn't do,
You couldn't actually do hearings.
it was a very difficult time for
Right.
everybody for a lot of different reasons.
Right.
But the court system was affected because we couldn't process cases.
Right.
So backlogs affect the sessions courts and the criminal courts.
So I hear that we have enough cases, because there's some study in Nashville, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I understand there's enough that the legislature could decide to add another general sessions judge. Is that right?
Well,
or is it another criminal court judge?
I think it's another criminal court
Okay,
judge.
all
I've seen that study. I haven't parsed through it line by
Right.
line, but I think that's mostly dealing with the
criminal court.
judges.
And we've had some turnover. I mean, Judge Scott Green has been there since about 2018, I think, 2014 maybe.
I think it was
2014, and he's the most senior judge, because Judge Sword moved on up to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and before he moved up, obviously Judge Kyle Hickson moved up. So, we've got Judge Hector Sanchez and Judge Emily Abbott, who both are, I guess they're still baby judges, but they're very experienced in what they did.
very experienced
at
and
the-
knowledgeable,
right.
and great at what they do.
Right. But yeah, and so it's interesting to have seen the criminal court judges kind of go from back in the day when we had Judge Leibowitz and Judge Jenkins and people who'd been on the bench for
For a long
a
time.
good number of years, and you just could always rely on somebody like Judge Leibowitz, although she was a Democrat, who really commanded the court. But it's good to see folks like Emily Abbott and Hector kind of cutting their teeth and making their way too. But let's just now kind of talk about. So you went through a process. It was a pretty speedy process.
It was a very speedy
because
process.
because Judge Jackson, although I think a lot of us had heard that
Right.
Judge Jackson was getting close to saying, "Hey, I'm ready to retire." It was like the end of October, and he's like, "I'm ready to retire," and then the next
It was,
thing.
I believe, like the
Next thing we
first-
know, he's gone by December 30th. So county commissions
I think he
in
announced
November
like the first week
of
or
November,
two
right?
of November,
Because-
that he was retiring at the end of the year, which was surprising, I think, to
Right,
everybody.
right.
Um,
And he decided that December 31st was going to be his last time. So for those of you that those of you that view this on a regular basis, the county commission has a process, and that process is not always something that can be done you can't just do it on a dime. Sometimes you got to put it into play. So basically you spent the first part of December going through the application process. I think there was 3 of you that applied, if I remember. 3 of you that were interviewed, and ultimately you ended up with a 10. Was it a 10-0?
No, 8-2.
8-2. That's right. It had Commissioner Fox and Commissioner Russell. So 8-2 vote to become the judge effective January the
first.
then you had the holidays, but
Right, and that was another complicating
right,
factor, was
right.
the
What-
Holidays, Christmas
What do we
and
do?
New Year's.
Yeah,
and,
what do we do for January 1st, 2nd, and then you got the weekend? But
and Judge Jackson retired. His last day was on the 31st,
Yeah.
and I had to move out of my old office and move into his office. But he still, it was, and over Christmas it was just kind of a. Plus, you got Christmas,
Right,
You're
yeah.
doing all that stuff, so
And the
it
courts-
was a really interesting time.
and the courts try not to do. They do what they have to do during Christmas, but it's not always ideal. But anyway,
Which is why I got sworn in the day after Christmas,
Right.
because all of my children were in town.
Oh,
and
that's
that was
good.
when they
Right.
would all be here, so that's why I did that.
So you've now had this is March the 27th. So you've had a good couple of months, almost 3 full months, I guess. So how's it been? Has it been what you expected?
It's really been an easy transition.
Good.
At least I feel that. I hope that my co-employees
Right.
would say the same. But I've been practicing in those courts for so long. I know how they operate. I am surprised at how much I sign my name and date things. That was a little surprising.
It will live forever in infamy.
I've gone through several pens already, but the transition's been really smooth,
Good.
and I've really been enjoying it. And I've got a great team of people that I'm working with, the bench clerks, and of course, the court officers and the bailiffs, and I've worked with the prosecutors and the defense attorneys for 25 years, 30 years. So
Right.
I know a lot about how that system works. I bring a lot of institutional knowledge. Reading a warrant in Sessions Court, that's basically your file.
Right.
So it's really kind of its own language. So you have to be able to look at that warrant and know what all that writing means and be able to interpret it. And if you don't speak that language, it's very confusing. But I'm fluent in that language.
Right.
So it's been an easy transition, and I'm really enjoying it.
So the one thing you haven't been fluent is the political process.
Right.
You got a pretty quick lesson throughout the commission process.
Baptism by fire.
Right, and then obviously one of the folks that applied made it very well known that they were going to run. So you knew you were going to have at least one opponent on the Republican primary, and that's exactly what you've got for May the 5th. Early voting starts April 15th, runs through the 30th. Cinco de Mayo, be sure.
Tax day and Cinco de Mayo.
Tax day on the 15th, first day of early vote. Cinco de Mayo. The one thing I'm saying, this is now the second one of these I've done. I've said, please, on May 5th, if you didn't vote April 15th through the 30th, go vote before you start participating in Cinco de Mayo. We don't, you got to keep your black in the box. Anyway.
To color within the lines.
That's right. But so now you're, for the last couple of months, in addition to being a general sessions judge, you had to go through the process of many different Republican club meetings, many different community meetings. You and your opponent appeared together. So what do you think about that whole process?
Well, I've never done any of that
Right.
before. And I didn't really know any of the commissioners before that. So I did a quick, I was able to meet with most of them and at least introduce myself. But,
Right.
You've only got a month to do
Right,
all that.
yeah.
And I hadn't really done much of a resume even because I've been working at the same job for
Right.
25 years. So
Absolutely.
getting all that just
Right.
prepped for the appointment process was a big step. And then jumping into campaigning. Now, I had considered if this position, I thought it might come up this year.
Right.
So I was thinking I had a lot of time to kind of get into it slowly.
Well,
but it didn't have it that
because
way.
ideally, if he'd have held out a couple more months, it could have been filled and then be on the next. Because it has to be, once there's a retirement or a departure from a position, you fill it, the commission fills it until the next election. So the next election is May 5th. So when Judge Kline is elected and retained her position in May the 5th of 26, she'll take office. She'll be on the general ballot on August 6th, but you have no Democrat opponent.
I do.
Oh, yeah, you do. I'm sorry.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Totally forgot. Yes, she does. So anyway, we gotta go all the way to August the 6th. Then she'll presumably retain her office September 1st. And then you gotta run again in
4 years.
4 years.
2030.
Because all our judges are elected at 8-year terms.
Right.
So he kind of left us 2 years before the half year, right? But anyway.
But it's, I got to give commission credit for stepping in and acting quickly on that.
Right.
I mean, it was a tough.
They could have drugged their
process,
feet.
and I'm really glad they didn't for the court system.
Right.
Because to be operating without one of those judges for
Right.
months at a time is it's really tough.
Right.
On the other judges and
Yeah.
the folks who work in that court because you've got to keep those courts moving with the numbers that I
Right.
told you.
Absolutely.
So I really give them credit
Sure.
for moving quickly and getting that position filled so that there was no break in coverage.
Yeah.
And that was important. It was a good decision for them to make.
The one thing I learned in 1998 is there was a chancellor position open, and there was a bunch of attorneys that helped one guy get the Republican primary out of a crowd of about 6, and then I chose to, because a couple of those attorneys were friends of mine, I ended up being the campaign manager to get them from the primary to the general. Unfortunately, in '98 we had 4 countywide seats that we had 4 Republican challengers. Judge Bumgardner was a Democrat on the bench. Tommy Schumpert was the county mayor. And then the chancellor was an open position, and then I can't remember the other race. It was the DA's race, and so Randy Nichols was running for re-election. So we didn't win the chancellor's race that I was involved in. We were the last one to be decided. The Democrats lost all 4 races that year because the Democrats were still pretty solid in Knox County. But the one thing I walked away from that was I will never manage another judicial race. And it's just because as a political candidate and as political judge and as a judge and a political candidate, there's firewalls built to where the judge can't necessarily ask for money. And so she kind of has a committee that do that. And so, there's just a whole lot of other stuff that happens. But
And we have different rules.
Right.
I mean, we
Oh,
have
yeah, absolutely.
ethical rules.
Right.
As a candidate or as a judge, we are bound by the rules of judicial ethics and
Right.
conduct
Yeah.
in our code. And those, we have to very strictly follow
Right.
those. And we don't need to be, we can't ever give opinions on how we would decide cases, and we have to be impartial. That's our job.
And
we have to be impartial.
Most all the judges, I don't know if this is the rule or not, but most of the judges I talk to, although they run on a partisan ticket, they don't like to be photographed at partisan events. I don't know if that's necessarily a rule, but I think it's smart on the judges I know that just kind of try to stay away from
that.
Well,
we can't endorse other candidates, in any form or fashion. We can endorse other judges, which that's recently changed in the last few years. But we can't endorse other candidates. We have to always uphold the integrity of the position.
Right.
And we don't want people thinking that our decisions are going to be influenced by our personal opinion, public pressure, politics. That has no role on the bench. And that's across the board. And that's the way it should be.
And just like when I got involved at the age of 16 in 1982, I mean, had I got a traffic citation and I was going to appear before it, at that time, all the judges were Democrats. I mean, as the Republican, I wouldn't want the Democrat, saying, hey, he's a Republican, I mean, so that needs to be removed from the whole process.
What you want is your judge to listen to the facts of your case, let you give your side of it, let the other side give their side, listen to those facts, know the law, apply the law, and then make a decision.
Right.
And that's what needs to happen
that's
on
the
every
process.
single case.
Right.
And any of that other stuff, just, my personal beliefs about any of it shouldn't matter. Now, obviously, if you've got someone who's coming before you that you have a relationship with, a family member or your neighbor, and you have to conflict off those cases.
Or a previous client or a previous somebody you prosecuted in the past.
Well, and I'm currently skipping over going into DUI sessions because I prosecuted half the docket, sometimes more, depending on the partner's situation in there. So for the next few months, until some of those cases that I have touched, the judges
kind of weed out.
I'm doing extra time in misdemeanor and skipping over DUI work. So
how's
just makes sense.
So how's it feel to now drive every quarter mile and see a Andrea Kline sign somewhere?
Well, I think it's great. That's the goal. That's why we put them up, right?
That is.
I think that.
But for someone who's not a narcissist, it's kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to see your name out there, right?
It's weird.
Yeah, it is
it's
weird.
weird.
It is weird.
It's
but
weird, but that's why we buy the signs to put them up. They don't look good in the garage.
That's right. So.
But it will be nice to drive down the road and not.
Man, they are everywhere.
Look at the signs.
This year is more. Every election, I say I need to get in the sign printing business. There are a lot
of signs out.
This year, well, first of all, the sheriffs started in September with signs, and now they're like 4x4s. I had threatened to say this, and I'm going to say this. And it's no reference to Judge Kline, but every time we pull up to an intersection and we pull up to an off-ramp, you have homeless folks out there asking. Now I see all these homeless politicians with their signs there. But anyway, I got to work that out later. Anyway, well, we've gone a good 30 minutes. Appreciate you being on here.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk to you.
I really want it, and I'm going to end up doing this with Judge Abbott at some point. She did manage to go unopposed in the primary and the general, but hey, that's great. So I'm going to do that. But, again, I just want folks to kind of understand. Look, we can't really talk about all the great political stuff that normally I'd like to talk about. So really just want to kind of educate everybody, because there's a lot of things in General Sessions Court I don't know. Just like the 4 and the misdemeanor court. But, people need to understand the process. We need to respect the fact that we have folks who've spent a lifetime doing what you've done and going through the legislative process and helping create Tennessee's elder abuse unit. It's
we
now
also,
being
I
used
failed to
everywhere.
mention the VAPIT meetings too, which is Vulnerable Adult Prosecution Investigative Team. I started that in Knox County. I brought all of the law enforcement folks and APS, Adult Protective Services folks together because we weren't working as a team. Got about 50 of those folks into the room and said, we can do better, we should do better. Let's start meeting, let's set up some ground rules, what we're gonna do, and that became state mandated. It
Wow.
happens in every jurisdiction now.
Wow.
To get those groups together talking about which cases need to be prosecuted, making sure that we're looking at these things regularly.
Sure.
And those numbers, I think, are still reported to the
Wow.
state. So we also, that's one thing, we weren't tracking any of this.
Right.
So now we at least have some processes in place, and I'm proud about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'll give you the last little bit to ask all the folks that watch the Brian Hornback Experience, kind of your spiel and ask for their votes. Remember, everybody, early vote starts April 15th. I'm planning to have all these done by April the 10th. It gives you a good 5 days before early vote starts. And then April 15th through the 30th and May 5th. And then we start all over again on May the 7th. I'm going to take May the 6th off, I think. But I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, thank you for talking to me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about myself and what I do. I hope that obviously we have success on May 5th, and I'm a lifetime public servant, and I hope I get the opportunity to keep serving as your General Sessions Court judge. And I hope the folks out there, if you have any questions, that you'll call me or email me. I've got a website.
What is that website? Well, I'll put it.
AndreaKline.com, I think.
I'll put it in the descriptor of the YouTube, and I'll put it everywhere I can, because she didn't know I was going to ask that question, and
I should know.
There's days I don't remember BrianHornback.com, and definitely
I think it's Andrea.Kline.
Okay.
AndreaKline.com.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You can just Google Andrea Kline, you'll find it. She also has a Facebook page that I tag on everything, but
Yes.
anyway.
But I appreciate your support. I appreciate your all support. If you have questions, please contact me. I hope I have the honor of continuing to serve as your Sessions Court judge, and I hope you'll get out and vote, and I appreciate your support, and I hope I can get your vote.
All right, that's it. 202's in the books, and we'll be moving on to 203 here. Hopefully we'll have a couple over this weekend, and then finish it all up. So again, thanks for being on here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.